want to go. I want that one. I want it. I want to stay. I'm helping. No, don't play with me. I'm playing. What's that, Mommy?
Caillou is a brat.
No, Daddy. I'm playing and I don't want Rosie to play in the sandbox with me.
It's probably one of the most popular internet opinions on anything. Most people will agree that this guy is annoying, his parents are neglectful, and the show is bad. But I have other opinions. See, the interesting thing about Caillou is how it's not just his parents who are neglectful. Everyone in his world idolizes him, treats him with a level of respect he just doesn't deserve. He's an enigma. Everything he wants, he gets. People bend to his will and idolize his name. From babysitters to random families reading about his stories, Caillou isn't seen as a brat in his world, he's seen as a god. And I want to know why. So I did some digging, and oh boy, did I find so much. Hidden in this children's show is a theory no one has talked about, because Caillou doesn't just have cancer, his parents aren't siblings, and he's not just One Punch Man. No, because this little child in his show is so much deeper. I promise you, after this video, you won't just hate Caillou, you'll fear him. This is the Caillou puppet theory. Let me explain. Caillou is a weird show, along with it of course being bad. See, it began in 1997 based on a children's book where Caillou, to be honest, just acts like a toddler, because he is. But it's still no excuse for a very bad show. But I think because of how bad it is, people ignore how weird it is. This show has very few distinct interesting elements no one ever talks about. Like, why does the entire show and their world only have primary colors as the color palette? Seriously, I watched like 10 hours of this show. I know, I'm insane. And not only was it horrible because the sound showing out on my speakers, but my eyes were bleached by the color choices, with everything in the show being red, yellow, blue, and maybe green. From Caillou's design to the houses to every character's clothing, everything is red, yellow, blue. But that's of course not the weirdest thing I really want to talk about, because the weirdest element and beginning of this theory is the narrator. See, Caillou has a narrator, but this is very common, as it's from a time when every kid's show had a British narrator. The weird thing is, we know what she looks like.
It's story time!
See, the narrator is an old woman with red hair who reads a picture book about Caillou to what we can presume to be her grandchildren. Now, this would mean Caillou is not real inside its own show, as there's a literal picture book and a doll of him in this woman's hand, right? Well, let's look a little closer. If you notice, the narrator looks like someone we know. Her name is Rosie. They both, of course, have the iconic red hair, with it being a very interesting detail to give to both characters when no one else in the show has it, including Rosie's parents. But I actually found more. See, she's reading a book on Caillou to her grandkids, except the book is a picture book, and the word choice she uses to her grandchildren hints at her knowing the story.
It all happened when Caillou was just 3 years old.
She uses words like that happened to Caillou at that age and etc. and doesn't really ever call it a story. Plus, both are animated, so theoretically, this doesn't have to be a picture book. It could easily be a photo book of childhood memories or something along those lines. Even further is every episode, there are these cloudy white borders, which me and many others would say they look like someone remembering back on something like thought bubbles. But even without any of this proof, I think there's a single detail that proves the narrator being Rosie and Caillou being real. Let me show you. Did you catch it? They both have the same elf doll in the background. It's the same doll. It may have a different art style, but it's the same one. This has to be Rosie telling her brother's stories decades later. But that makes me question one other thing. Why is Caillou being treated the way he is? Why are these honestly horrible life lessons, even if real stories of Rosie's brother, being told to her grandkids? Or why does anyone in the show itself give a pass when he does a really bad thing? It's not just his parents, it's everyone. His grandpa, his grandma, a random babysitter, his sister, the neighbors, other kids, everyone in his life treats him like he's Jesus Christ when he is literally the Antichrist. It just doesn't make sense. He literally squeezes his sister's cheek so hard it makes her cry because he doesn't like that she exists. And his mom just says, "Play nice, you two." I don't think the baby can play nice. The little boy is comically evil personal and selfish, and no one bats an eye. His literal theme song is him going, "It's me, I'm Caillou, everything is about me," for a full minute. The child is an enigma of his world, with getting everything he wants, no matter if he screams or cries, he is given everything. But I think I know why. See, he's not just a random bald kid with bad parents or even in a bad town. He's a bald kid with interdimensional powers over space and time, who cries because the moisture in his eyes can't bear being close to the eldritch horror that is Caillou. Let me explain. But first, a word from our sponsor, me. Are you feeling overwhelmingly sad? Well, I have the solution. Some may say therapy, meditation, going outside, but I say you don't need any of those things, and you can trust me. I watched Bubble Guppies for the lore. So you may ask, what can solve my sadness? My Patreon! That's right, I have a Patreon page, and oh boy, we'll cure that depression. Are you feeling bored or lonely? Well, not only will you have videos early, so you can fill that hole in your heart, but you will get bonus content when I make it. It's a great deal, honestly, and helps me out greatly, but more importantly, it helps you. So go do yourself a favor and subscribe to my Patreon. Caillou is weird, but not in the way you think. See, I went on about how his world treats him and how he gets everything he wants, but more importantly is how his world operates in response to him. It's not just the people who bend to this boy's will, reality does as well. Now, the first interesting element to prove Caillou is supernaturally powerful is his age. The show highlights it with the first episode saying he's 4, along with the intro, which is more interesting because every intro for the full 5 seasons continue to say he's 4. He doesn't age, but maybe it's a Simpsons situation. Except we actually do have proof of time passing. See, the show has 6 Christmas specials, which means at least 6 years have passed, along with the sister, Rosie, starting out as a toddler and ending as an 8-year-old with a full set of red hair. Caillou, on the other hand, is still bald. Both of these are evidence of time passing, but for some unknown reason, Caillou isn't affected. For a show that makes it clear his age and that time passes, why is he not aging? But now, I think it's time to talk about not even a defined power, but just a quip that will break your understanding of this show fully. It's from a music video / episode, meaning I'll have to mute it and throw in my own sinister music, but dear God, does it change everything. There is a Caillou multiverse, and he has power over it. This episode, which does fall under the horrible era of Caillou that somehow looks even worse, and for some reason the creators decided to throw in a multiverse. I guess it fits the time, but this is insane. The entire video is about Caillou going over all the things he wants to do in life, and how he'll know he'll do them because he crosses into different dimensions, teleporting from one to one, showing himself doing those things, and then absorbing the different Caillous from those universes into himself with some weird gold yellow glow. But this somehow isn't even the end of Caillou's reality warping transdimensional powers. I've been holding off from showing this specific segment that was a limited run in a random parts of season 2's episodes because honestly, it's some of the craziest things I've ever seen. Here it is.
That's me.
And me!
Not only does Caillou have powers to cross the multiverse and absorb the forms of his multiversal clones, but has the power to wave his hand and transform his stuffed animals into weird puppets in a different dimension where everything is live action, and he can do so to his living cat. This is the single weirdest part of the entire show, being concrete proof that Caillou is an ageless, eldritch being with influence over the people of his world, but also the world itself, having access to reality warping, dimension defying powers. This show isn't about some random kid, it's about the literal Antichrist. What is going on? Well, I think I actually know. See, now that we have gone over his power, we need to see what it created. We need to talk about the most damning evidence in this entire video. The single reason I even made this theory. Caillou is already a strange show, with a weird bald kid who now has the literal superpowers, not that one, but there's something stranger about it that we haven't even talked about, being the puppets. See, when Caillou uses his newfound power and turns his stuffed animals and his literal cat into these weird puppets, they are sent to an entirely new live-action world void of humans. Let me explain. See, in this world that is an exact replica of Caillou's home backyard, these puppets are alone. Gilbert, who is Caillou's cat, takes on a leader role, having a very sinister vibe, to be honest, to him with his voice, and later scenes will go over. These puppets also have memories and take on the same problems Caillou is dealing with in his own episode, which is very strange because we actually have confirmation that this is real. See, at first you may assume this is just Caillou playing with his cat and stuffed animals. Like, it seems way more likely he doesn't have trans-dimensional powers and that there isn't a separate live-action world that his stuffed animals and a cat only live in, right? Well, if you watch the episode with the puppet segments, they disperse them through the episodes, similar to a commercial break, mainly because they only exist to pad out the runtime, which I have familiar with, being that is a literal point of my catchphrase. Well, during these episodes, we see Caillou not playing with his toys and actively doing other things, like going to the beach or simply being in a separate room. But to really hammer in that he isn't playing imagination is that he leaves the room when he waves his hand, does the demon magic. This, in my opinion, is proof this can't be imagination, which means all of this is real and the live action world is open to me theorizing. And oh boy, is there a lot. The first important thing to note is that these puppets are aware of Caillou and his family, but again, they simply aren't in the puppet world. These guys also know of the problems Caillou has and even his fears. Oh, and the sky is purple. Yeah, I really wanted to mention that because I still have no idea why. No lore reason, no canon reason, not even a reason for the team behind Caillou to do this. I'm simply coming to the conclusion either the people behind the show are colorblind or they really hate me. Now, I think the more important question is what happens when the puppets are, well, becoming puppets and being sent over to the live action world. Like, what does Caillou actually do to them? Well, I think we actually know. The first thing in every puppet segment we see is the puppets waking up from a deep sleep. Teddy will usually be under the bed, Gilbert will be somewhere in the corner, and Rex will be somewhere. This is interesting because when Caillou waves them away, they aren't in these places at all. We see the stuffed animals and the cat in animated form just sitting on the bed, while in the live action world, we see them doing stuff. This points to there being some sort of weird soul transfer between these worlds, with Caillou sending them into one another. They exist at the same time, but when you're in one, your life was in the other. Again, this is way more interesting because we see him do this to a living cat, which means a living being can get turned into a stuffed animal in the animated world, then their soul transferred over into a puppet in the live action world. This show isn't about some bald kid being mean, it's about Caillou committing trans-dimensional soul binding on his stuffed animal and a cat. But that isn't even the craziest thing about the puppet world. What if I told you that I have made a discovery that both proves a decade-old theory but takes it to a new level? Let me explain. See, there's a certain episode or segment or whatever you want to call it with these puppets where Teddy gets sick with the flu. Caillou also had the flu, so this is definitely Caillou's weird influence over this world seeping in. What's more interesting is the world's response and how the puppets do as well. They are very worried about it, or more Rex than Teddy are. The weird thing is Teddy is fine in about the span of an hour. They even pointed out and how he definitely had the flu, but he was fully fine. This would mean that this world is well different than ours, which I think the purple sky hinted at, but the fact that Teddy is so quick to recover and the sickness never really gets bad would say that this world is one without pain. More evidence is there's many times in other episodes when, say, Rex would fall and hurt his leg, but then a few minutes later, a character will ask, "How's your leg?" and he will respond, "It's actually perfectly fine. I'm right back to how I always am." Side note, I just want to make it clear so no one in the comments is going, "Why aren't you showing the footage for these clips?" I actually can't because these puppet segments have basically been wiped away from the episodes. I watched a big 17-hour official compilation. I didn't have any of these segments anywhere because they were just hidden away, but I know they exist and found some certain ones that have been archived, which are the ones I'm mainly talking about. But now, I think I need to show you the single clip that made this theory. See, it's during the segment where Teddy is sick with the flu, and right before he's magically better, Rexy is worrying about him. Play the clip.
What if Teddy was sick for a long time?
Yeah.
Oh, What if it was a long, long time?
Yeah.
What if...
Oh, Rexy. It's just the flu.
When I first saw this, I was baffled. Why in any way is Rex worrying about Teddy not getting better? Why did Gilbert shut him down so quickly? I do want to know what happens. Plus, Gilbert with his arms wrapped around him and head over his shoulder looks so unnecessarily sinister, like he's trying to quiet him and silence the idea of what happens if Teddy doesn't get better. But the weirdest thing is if this world is real but constructed based on Caillou's thoughts and feelings, to the point I would even say each puppet represents a different side of Caillou, why is it that they're so scared of sickness and of not getting better? Caillou is a little boy. Why does he have such strong feelings or fears of all of this? Why did he create an entire dimension where his fears can't exist? This is a world built off him, a world that exists without pain but fears it to death, which would hint at Caillou himself fearing death. And with what we know, maybe, just maybe, there's a reason. Let me explain. Okay, so many of you may have already caught on to what I'm hinting at, being one of the most common fan theories for not just Caillou, but for anything. Caillou has cancer. I even mentioned it in the beginning, saying he doesn't just have cancer, because he doesn't. It's so much deeper. It solves a lot of problems in the show, from him being bald to why everyone treats him differently. And even now, I've discovered that his subconscious mental construct in the form of some puppets fear death and sickness. It's a pretty easy path to go down, but I find it too easy. Just saying he's dead or gonna die is so overly edgy without evidence for me, and I would need something to spice it up. Well, I think I actually have something. Caillou isn't normal. He isn't just a kid. Now, whether he's the literal Antichrist or the reincarnation of some god or just an eldritch being, he's doing things he shouldn't be able to. He's not dying. Now, at first you may say, oh, well, he's a child, Noah. He's not dying. But he's not aging, meaning theoretically, he's not gonna die from old age. So if age can't take him out, maybe it's cancer. Really, to be honest, any life-threatening disease. It's just the bald head points to cancer. It doesn't really matter what Caillou has that is somehow threatening his life, because what it is, we know he's worried. But I think the more interesting thing is I don't believe it killed him. I think Caillou escaped the disease. Not just from recovering, but from something so much deeper. See, there's an entire episode where Caillou is sad about the concept of death, and his dad tries to comfort him. He explains how yes, it happens to everyone, but it matters more what you do with them. Then Caillou looks at Teddy, and what does he do? He asks if Teddy will die, and his father, of course, says no. Even more interesting is that both his cat and Teddy are sitting on one side of him, and his father is on the other. They're representing two sides of him, like a devil and angel on his shoulder, except it's immortality and death. One is his father, who is mortal and ages and will eventually die, and the other is his weird puppet stuffed animals that live in a world without pain or time, one of his own creation, and maybe an eventual home. And I think I know which one he chooses. What if I told you Caillou used his power to transform things into living and non-living things on himself? You wouldn't believe me? Oh, I sound crazy? Well, I have proof. Not only do we know he can do this on living things, being his cat, but he would be going to a world without pain, one where his friends don't age or die, one where the sky is purple for some reason. So maybe, just maybe, he would want to run off into this world where, to be honest, everything is perfect, at least for Caillou. You look at the weird multiverse episode, it has a strong focus on him doing all the things he dreamed of doing, and how he'll grow up to be a doctor and then be a bus driver, etc. So it really doesn't seem crazy if for some reason, if put in a situation where he couldn't, he would do anything to escape. But you know, it's still pretty crazy, and we're bordering fan fiction with this entire idea that he hid away in this puppet dimension and turned his real body into a stuffed toy being crazy and not possible, right? Well, what if I told you I found his body? We know when the soul transfer from stuffed animal to puppet, they leave the stuffed animal behind. Also with Gilbert the cat's body turning from a real cat to a stuffed animal. Well, I found Caillou. He's hidden in every episode episode in real plain sight. Where is he? Sitting and watching his own story being told. He's been here the entire time with the narrator in her lap. Every episode, Caillou is watching and listening. Whether he's the Antichrist or a Greek god in the mortal form or reincarnation of Japanese deity or a multiversal eldritch horror, Caillou is an enigma. The eldritch demon child is hairless because the hair on his newborn body ran in fear. The world tried to take him out. With a few cries and waves of his hand, the ageless, interdimensional child of death said no. He made a world without pain, and that is where he will rest. He has no name, he does not have age, and he has no hair.